Well, good morning, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to the latest in Evenbreak Explores series. This is where we take a little bit of a deeper dive into some issue that's relevant to disability inclusion, and we bring in an expert that we can explore this issue with in a bit more depth. And today we're looking at promoting and supporting people with sight loss. So I'd like to just start by introducing myself. So I'm Jane Hatton. I'm the founder and CEO of Evenbreak. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a white woman in her 60s with blonde hair, and I'm wearing glasses and a grey top today. And I'd like to ask you, Roy, very warm welcome to you. Could you introduce yourself as well, please?
Thank you, Jane, and good morning, everyone that's listening. So my name is Roy Imeson. I work for the RNIB. I pronounce myself as he. I live in North Devon, so there's a bit of sun coming through the window at the moment. That's a lot of luck on my behalf. I'm in my 50s and white, and I'm wearing a check shirt just so that I can dazzle the screen a little bit with my shirt.
Thanks, Roy. So today we're going to be talking specifically about sight loss and supporting people with sight loss within the workplace. As you know, Evenbreak is a social enterprise which is run by and for disabled people. We have people with sight loss in our team, and we have many candidates who use our job board with sight loss as well. So this is an area of real importance and relevance to us, and also to any of you on the call who are employers or managers or responsible for any kind of inclusion within the workplace, because it's a fact of life. You know, a number of us have sight loss to varying degrees. I'm wearing glasses. I wouldn't classify myself as blind, but I do have an eye condition which might turn that way. So we're going to see how that goes later on. But I think it's a really important issue for all employers to be aware of, because we're talking about talent. And I think, Roy, I really wanted to start with looking at, I can certainly say from my perspective, but often I think employers will look at disabled people or people with sight loss as a bit of a kind of a liability, a bit of a risk to employ. But actually, you know, I find from my own experience of employing people that actually employers have a lot to gain by employing people with sight loss. And I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Well, as a registered blind person, and I've gone through a journey since I was in my 40s when I was first diagnosed with retina pigmentosis. I would say that the journey is quite interesting, but how we are employed, you've got to look at the volume of people that are actually registered. Currently, there's 11,000 registered blind and partially sighted people that are actively looking for work at the moment. That registration means that they've completed a form called CV1. And as we know, the National Health Service is picking up. This number is growing as the volume of people that are becoming registered through the system. But we've got to think of these 11,000 people as a registered pool of potential applicants and talent for employers to tap into. Blind and partially sighted people are employed in many different roles and jobs, jobs that vary from sports to sales, admin, to, like myself, being involved in the work that the RNIB carry out. The people with sight loss would succeed in a variety of other roles, some roles that we don't know exist at the moment. But we have to just think of everyone as it comes down to whether we have the training, the skills, the experience, or what the manager, the recruitment manager, or the potential manager can explore from that person.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, for me, it's about looking at people as a source of talent rather than a problem to be solved. And
yeah,
certainly when I think of the people that we employ at Evenbreak, you know, we gain such a lot. Obviously, a lot of our candidates are blind or partially sighted. And so having members of the team who've gone through that same journey means that we can be much more understanding of what their needs are. But also from my perspective, it's about making things accessible. You know, I can see, so I don't know which technology works with a screen reader and which doesn't, because I don't use a screen reader. But when we have people within our organization who do use screen readers, it means we can automatically test everything that we do to make sure it's accessible to people who use screen readers. So it's not about retrofitting things afterwards to make them accessible. We can actually make sure that before a service or a product or a piece of marketing or whatever it might be goes out, that we think about that accessibility side of it. So things like alt tag text for, you know, images and things that I wouldn't think about. But we do have people who obviously depend on those, and so they will make sure that what we do reflects the needs of many of our candidates, and of course many of people who are working within our employers. It's not an us and them, it's a kind of us, isn't it, really?
It is. I listened to someone explain the other day, really, that we all think stereotypes of where people are, but if we can remove the stereotypes and think us as humans, I think that barrier becomes less. But it is also thinking, as you say, alt text is a fantastic thing that's been around for many years, but it makes such a difference to not just social media, but to the way that we learn, the way that we're taught, because we use pictures a great deal of the time in literature. Let's face it, looking at a document that's got no pictures, it becomes quite dull. But if you don't know what that picture is, as we both described who we are at the beginning, it doesn't have to be wordy, but it can be with a bit of humour as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Text that the blind and partially sighted people will have humour, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And those 11,000 people that you mentioned, you know, most of the employers I'm talking to at the moment are talking about skill shortages and having jobs that they're really finding it difficult to fill. And yet there are 11,000 people waiting, motivated, wanting to work. And actually, we just need to be encouraging employers to look at that pool of people as a pool of potential talent.
Without a doubt. You've also, I mean, that 11,000 is what's registered. And we all know that across our lives, you don't always hit the registration form at the right time. So that number will be higher.
Yes.
And I was in employment, but I was looking for work. That's how I came into this job. So there's a lot of people that are career changes that I call them the green grass changes, because we're always looking for the other side of the fence, that the grass over there will be better. So it's not necessarily people that are not employed. It could be people that are underemployed in a job that they feel obliged that they have to be it because they're you know, hard to say, but they're disabled.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know, we find that too, that people have, you know, perhaps acquired, and a lot of people with sight loss weren't born blind. They'll have lost their sight during their lives. And then it can mean a change of career. You know, if you're a driver and you lose your sight, you're going to have to find a different way of earning a living. So, but, you know, people tend to be really resourceful. I remember reading somewhere about a doctor in France who was using Braille readers, women who were Braille readers, to do breast examinations for lumps, because their fingers were so sensitive, because they were reading Braille, that they could detect lumps much smaller than your average doctor could. So there are all sorts of things that, you know, you don't think about. And also I'm conscious sometimes when I talk to our team, you know, of people with sight loss, and they'll talk about, you know, somebody's tone of voice, or that person doesn't sound as happy today, and the nuances of that kind of tone of voice is picked up much more carefully than I would, because I have so many different sensory inputs going on. They're focusing on the sound. In the same that, you know, we have employees with hearing loss who are much more observant of changes in body language and non-verbal communication. So, you know, there is that kind of, we just need to be aware of not always thinking about what people can't do, but actually focusing on what they can do. And that's going to be far more important.
It's almost like listening to the human and seeing what the human can do for you, rather than having that, oh, well, that you know, you can't see, so you can't sell.
Yes.
I trained for years in sales and worked in sales and had every tool to hand, but 90% of my tools disappeared when all of a sudden I couldn't see hand movements. For someone who talks with his hands, not to be able to see the person opposite moving their hands around caused me a great problem. But you end up focusing on their eyes, and you just learn a different way of understanding how body language goes. I practiced on my wife, I will say, watching her language, and
Mm.
usually as we were bringing up the children, her tone, I could tell when she was in that pitch that parents get to with children, and it's about adapting, isn't it, and learning the
Yeah,
skills.
definitely, yeah. So we've recognised then that people with sight loss form a very important part of the pool of untapped talent that's out there. But what kind of barriers do people with sight loss face? You know, when they're looking for jobs, what kind of barriers might they face?
I mean, this is a great question, because what barriers I will say someone will say they have extra barriers or different barriers. So it's looking at what the common problems are, especially when it comes to looking for work. When we have that urge to look for the next job, the next opportunity, or the first job or opportunity, the first place we used to go to was the Times newspaper or the local newspaper. That's changed. We've moved on a great deal from that. We now will go straight away to the World Wide Web. And the first thing you'll put in the job search there is sales. Well, let's pick on sales. And if you can't get to read that job description or see that job description, there's your first barrier. It's how do you advertise that job, remembering that we all use Google or other platforms to search for jobs. The next barrier is the next obvious one, is then you found the sales job that you're going to apply for, that pitch. You like the product, you like the business that's selling it. You then go to apply, you click a button and you disappear onto another screen. Now, if you're using screen technology that reads a screen reader, that's your next barrier. And let's face it, if you can't apply for the job, you're not going to get any further with that.
It's amazing, isn't it, how many websites aren't accessible? And we've known about accessibility for a long time, haven't we? You know, the web has now been around for a while. It's not new anymore.
No.
And, you know, the technology to make it more accessible has been known about for some time. And that's improving, of course, all the time. But it amazes me how many websites, how many career sites, even how many job boards are inaccessible to people who use screen readers, which just seems crazy to me. Why would you not have, you know, technology that the candidates you're trying to attract can use? It doesn't make any sense. It
doesn't. It's a big frustration of mine, and it was prior to looking at businesses. In essence, the regulation it comes under an acronym of WCGA, which for someone with dyslexia, just remembering the order of that is quite a challenge. But
I think you rememred it wrong then as well, actually, if you don't mind saying.
No, that's fine. And that just says it all, really. It's let's make the accessibility accessible, in the fact that when websites were developed, when they first came around, everyone was, you know, oh, what's your website? And some businesses progressed and made their, you know, let's make mine stand out. I always remember one business went orange, and that's how their kite mark was. Everything was orange, whereas with a screen reader, you wouldn't know you were looking at orange. However, the font behind it you would lose because the font color was not accessible. And then you have titles, isn't it, and drop down bars on the top and on the left hand side, and then some job pages they advertise in small print at the bottom. It can work for us, or job site, or job search, or careers, so many different terminologies, rather than straightforward, simple job page on their website.
Sure.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
get through all of that, even if they can somehow manage to submit an application, then there's the rest of the recruitment process.
Gosh, again, it comes back to the same process. If you're a business that is advertising for jobs, the next part is how do you apply for the jobs, and then it's the recruitment process and the package. So with the first barrier, obviously, is finding where that is through the career page, but it's look at your process and your application form and your job description.
Yeah, for sure.
Job descriptions are can be the next point of call, because if you advertise in there, must have a full clean driver's license. Although I'm registered blind. I kept my driver's license, but I can assure you, no one would sit in the car with me.
Don't blame them.
And that's if I'm driving. But it's looking at that, and then an interview. I would say the interview process as well is something that bears thinking about. I have an assistance dog. She will walk in on camera at some stage because she wanders around the house. But an assistance dog to get you into a job interview, right? If I've got to arrive at your place of work and you're not expecting a dog and you're the interviewer and you're allergic to fur, well, we're not going to have a good relationship right from the off, are they? Because they're going to be thinking, I've got to move that person out here, and I'm not going to know. So it's think of the interview processes and help that become an inclusive. And then the sifting process as well. We've got to bear in mind that most people that will listen to this, if I say unconscious bias, they're there. They know what we mean. But some people won't understand what that means. They'll see the blind person walk in and they'll see the blind person, not the person. And I think that's where this unconscious bias should be. I mean, what do you think on that, Jane?
Yeah, I know, I agree. And I think there are a lot of assumptions that are made. I remember Mohammed, who works for us, saying that he went for an interview after he'd finished his 2 degrees. And the interviewer saying, oh, well, of course, you won't be able to use emails. And he said, well, actually, I've managed to get through 2 degrees. So actually using emails is not a problem at all. And that's not because that person was malicious. It was because they just had no clue about the kind of technology that's available these days. So I think it's not just unconscious bias. I think it's conscious bias. It's kind of thinking, how can we employ someone that, as far as I'm aware, can't use a computer or can't do this or can't do that? And it's always focusing on the can'ts rather than actually testing that assumption and saying to the candidate, you know, that the job involves you doing X, Y, Z. How would you do that? They may be able to say, oh, well, I use a screen reader, or, oh, well, I've got assistive technology for that, or, oh, well, I don't do it the way that you do it. I would do it this way instead. And so rather than making those assumptions and then making your hiring decision based on them, it's actually about testing those out and not just focusing on the can'ts, but also what is it that candidate is bringing with them. They will have faced so many barriers in life generally, you know, outside of even looking for work, and will have become resourceful and creative and problem solving because that's what they have to do just to get through every day. You know, people with sight loss can't do everything in the same way that everybody else does. So they have to find other ways of doing things. And that brings out that creativity and that innovation. And actually, as an employer, that's what you want, is someone who's got those problem solving skills, that doesn't run away at the first sign of an obstacle, you know, that can think of different ways of doing things. That's actually what you need. But if we're focusing on the, oh, well, they can't do this and they can't do that, then we're not going to.
That's a good point, a very good point that I try to make as well, is that a blind person will have set of routines that they follow. The joke I make about the check shirt is that my shirts are in color order and the checks are in the middle of the wardrobe. So it's that simple process that you think along those lines. So we will have routines and patterns that we'll follow, and not being able to read a map or navigate a mouse, we'll find a way. And it's that process of getting there. And there's so much assistive technology and that's available now. Someone introduced me to what's 3 words. Yes. And now that's a complete game changer for me, because I now can find places, as long as the dyslexic brain doesn't put those 3 words in the wrong order and I end up in Poole rather than Portsmouth. It's there, but it's that we will think around some of the problems that are there. So the point I'm making is that recruitment process is think differently about how you write your application for your job descriptions, and think differently about the interviews and how you're going to get the best. And when we say the best, it's that person feeling relaxed and talking about themselves in the interview. Yeah,
for sure. So what do you think that recruiters really could do to remove some of those barriers? How can we make it just as easy for someone with sight loss to excel in a recruitment process as anybody else?
Yeah, Well, so the first thing is both employees and colleagues need to be aware of sight loss and the understanding of what sight loss actually means. The preconception stereotypes that the blind person must be wearing sunglasses and walk with a white stick is one preconception that we need to sort of knock down, because not every blind or partially sighted person uses a white cane. So make sure that the staff are involved in the selection and interview processes, have a full understanding of the equality and diversity of what blind means. So education is the first part, and start at the recruitment team, and how you develop that recruitment team. I mean, if you're hand on heart solely going to look at making a difference to your diverse team, it has to start at the recruitment process and the people that are going to be doing that. So do you need to look at the whole process from, as we've laboured, the website, the career packs, the interview, but we're also missing out one big part, which is the reasonable adjustment statement.
Yeah, for sure.
What are we going to do about the reasonable adjustment part? And do you need to have people within that team that are experts at reasonable adjustment? And when I say expert, you can't be an expert, because we're all individual humans and we all have different needs. One will want one piece of software, one will want another piece of software. So it's look at that. Look at where you advertise and use more tools to recruit through career channels.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes with reasonable adjustment, I don't even like the word reasonable adjustments, besides what's reasonable, but with offering adjustments, sometimes with all the best intentions, an employer might say, are you disabled? Yes, no. What do you need? And actually, that's quite difficult, because as a disabled person myself, I want to choose when I tell you whether I'm disabled or not, because I don't know if I trust you well enough to tell you at this point. And that seems quite a harsh way of asking, and it feels a little bit like minimum legislation compliance rather than a will to help. And what we recommend that employers do is put something in. You can still ask that same question, but actually asking it like, we want all of our candidates to shine in our recruitment process. What do we need to do to help you perform at your best? Or, words to that effect. Doesn't mention disability, doesn't say you've got to tell us if you're disabled. It just says, what do we need to do for you to shine in this process? And I think it's a much more warm and friendly way of asking the question, rather than tell us now whether you're disabled or not. And so I think there are ways of asking those questions and offering those adjustments that are much more warm and inclusive, rather than that kind of very stark black and white, yes or no kind of question. And then it's just about being willing to think about things. I know that if you're blind and you go into the interview room and they say, oh, help yourself to water, that's no use at all if you can't see the jug or the glass. How are you, so it's just about sensible things. It's about using your brain, isn't it? And putting a glass of water in front of them and say there's a glass of water in front of you, for example.
Yeah, as long as it's not hot. But it's about that, isn't it? It's about going back to that training, isn't it? And understanding where they've got to think about with people. We're an aging workforce as well. We're forever telling everyone that we're all going to work till we're older. So these problems are not just going to, be aimed at the disabled people, as dare I say it, or people blind and partially sighted. It's a whole raft of other things that have got to come into the equation. It's an employer yesterday I spoke to and spoke to them about their processes, and you never stop learning. That's one thing I will say before I say this. And in their processes, they've now made a point of phoning applicants. So their first sifting is to check the basic requirements, as they do, and then they phone the candidates. So they're knocking down that awful part of introduction.
Yeah.
The first date is over the phone. It's a lot easier than a text, isn't it? And so on and so forth. So it's thinking long term, but thinking, how are we going to attract the talent and gain the best talent? I mean, that is time consuming to phone, but nevertheless, is it time consuming if you end up with a talented person?
Well, absolutely. And to me, the time involved in losing, not getting the right person for the job is that's horrific, isn't it? That can take months to sort out in lost productivity and going through the recruitment process again. So the whole point of the recruitment process is you get the very, very best person for the job. And what we're trying to do here is just say the very best person for the job may be rejected for the wrong reasons, or may be excluded for the wrong reasons. They may not even be able to apply.
No, and they may be nervous of arriving, and that's what that phone call sort of
for sure.
helps remove there. So you've done that nice, as you Jane, as you mentioned there. You've not said, do you need reasonable adjustment, are you disabled? It's all automatically you're saying, how can we help you get to the place, and this is the interview. So that's one of the barriers that we have to think about, the stereotypes and the training, and how we do get that person to interview.
Yeah, for sure. We also have to remember, of course, people with hearing loss, the phone call might not work. So that none of these things are as straightforward as we.
No, very true, very true. What is one cure for one person is a hindrance for somebody else.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I think, though, as well, as you mentioned, the recruitment process is really important, because that's the gateway, isn't it? That's the gateway to people being able to get into employment.
Yeah.
And we know, well, I certainly know from my own experience with the wonderful team at Evenbreak, that the more disabled people you work with, the more that fear goes, and the more knowledge you get, and the more you share with each other, and the more it becomes an everyday topic of conversation rather than the elephant in the room. So there's, we only employ disabled people at Evenbreak, but every day I learn something from my colleagues about a disability that I don't have. And I hope that sometimes they learn from me too. But in order for that to happen, you have to have an organisation which is not just got great, inclusive and accessible recruitment process, but the actual organisation itself needs to be, barrier-free. It needs to be open. It needs to be inclusive, so that people don't actually get the job and then it all falls apart because either the adjustments aren't put in place, or they're not included, or their skills aren't recognised, or disability is never talked about. It's kind of the elephant in the room. So it's not just about recruitment. It's also about making sure that once you've recruited all of this amazing, diverse talent that's out there, that you can not only retain that talent, but help it develop and progress and, move up through the career progression chain. So what would you say to employers about, making sure their organizations are, some of it's the same, isn't it? Some of it's about training.
Yeah, so training is paramount to every element of life. Lifelong learning is a statement that we hang on to. But we've also got to think about how much the world has evolved. Technology is an enabler. It's an amazing thing to have. And I can talk now about how technology has helped me. I use Horizon software, which is a piece of technology that helps me read documents without reading documents, so on and so forth. But we've got to look at the assistive technology and how that will support. Look at your own internal systems. Are they Windows based? Are they going to use iPad technology or Microsoft technology the solution, or is it a Google solution? So those are two parts of one element of looking at the job, but the job doesn't have to be desperate. Let's not just put all blind and partially sighted people behind a laptop screen. There are other areas that can be there. It's also knowing where the funding to pay for this technology and assistant software is going to come from, and then experiencing using it. Going back to, like you were saying about, you learn from your colleagues, but somebody will be the expert of something within your team. So it's talk to each other, isn't it? Within that, and learn from there. I also will highlight that eyesight loss is progressive. So at the moment, I'm very fortunate. I've got central vision, but further down the line, as I get older, it will be worse. So what the solution may be today won't be my solution for tomorrow. So in essence, you do have to be thinking ahead of the way of where to go, and that not one solution will fit everybody that's within the workplace. Look where you're going to place the person to work. Is the location of the desk suitable? Is the light there for them? Is there going to arrive with a guide dog, an assistance dog? Do they have a support worker? We haven't talked about support workers as an option. And then look within other barriers is going back to training. PowerPoints are not the best tool to deliver as training, even though right at the beginning we talked about alt text. Imagine a PowerPoint presentation with alt text running alongside it. The two don't really go well together. And I will use the term death by PowerPoint. So if nothing else, the people that are listening today, rethink how you train, rethink PowerPoints. And then the next thing is that we all know the software updates, and with updates comes change. And if someone moved my check shirt to the front of my wardrobe, I wouldn't be wearing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've noticed that sometimes when they update software, it becomes less accessible, not more accessible. So we can't always make the assumption that it's getting better every time it's upgraded, because that's not always the case for everybody. Yeah, and I think for me, it's also about the kind of culture of an organization. And, you know, the way I would look at an organization to see how inclusive it is, it's about listening to the conversations that are happening. And for me, it's not just about, oh, right, so we've got some employees with sight loss, which means we've got to do A, B, and C. We've got some employees with hearing loss, so we've got to do X, Y, and Z. It's actually not about that. It's about looking at every single employee and saying, what do we need to do as an organization to help you work at your best, regardless of whether they're disabled or not? Because as you say, everybody will need different things. So for me, it may be that someone has sight loss that they're still able to mask and pretending they haven't got, and they're just muddling through somehow. But that's exhausting, and it gives people headaches. And, you know, if they're looking at screens that aren't appropriate, can be really quite difficult. And actually what we should be doing is saying to every employee, whoever, what is it we need to do? And that might be around flexible working. It might be around providing a bowl of water for the guide dog. It might be about making sure that you don't move the desks around without warning people. You know, it could be all sorts of different things and for different people. So for me, it's not about, you know, a good manager, a good organization will look at all of its people and want them to have what they need in order to thrive. And there will be specific things that some people will need. So it might be a BSL interpreter like we have here today, or it might be a support worker, or it might be assistive technology. But rather than making that assumptions, it's about having those open conversations where people feel safe to talk about, oh, well, actually, I'm dyslexic and I could really do with a monitor that does this, you know, whatever it might be, or my sight impairment involves this, so I might need a magnifier, or it involves something else, so I might need something else. And it's about people feeling safe to have those conversations without thinking that they're either going to get ignored or then looked over for promotion or development opportunities. You know, there is this assumption that disabled people, you know, are just glad to have a job. They won't be ambitious. Why wouldn't we be? We can be just as ambitious or otherwise as anybody else. So it's about having those individual conversations and making sure that we remove obvious barriers that might be affecting everybody, but actually listening to those stories of people about, well, actually, this is my situation at the moment, and this is what I'd find really helpful. And as you say, revisiting that conversation, because that impairment might get worse or change over time, but also people will acquire other disabilities and long-term health conditions. You know, sadly, having one disability doesn't mean that you're then immune from having any others. And people do, you know, gain all sorts of 2% of the workforce will become disabled or acquire a long-term health condition every year. So none of us are immune from this. But if you have an organization that's open and inclusive and has these open conversations, then I think it just makes it easier for people to be themselves and to ask for what they need without worrying about what the consequences might be of that.
Yeah, I think when you look at multi-layered organizations that employ 1,000+ employees in very different roles, it's how do you have those conversations as well, because you've got to be equal to all. And what I will say is that we're talking the perfect employment and the perfect building. It doesn't have to be that. Let's progressively start with looking at the minimum changes, the minimum requirements to develop this diverse team. And then in time, look at the aesthetics of the building. If you're an office-based, as you gathered from my room, bright is my king, darkness is my enemy. Whereas the next person, it could be the other way around. So we would be sat in polar parts of a building. But it then comes back to that diverse employment of hybrid employment, that perhaps the best workplace is the home. So it's flexibility.
It is. And for me, it's about choices. Yeah, it's about choice, isn't it? Because my worry after the pandemic is that there was a kind of people can work from home now. Who knew? Well, that's good, because all the disabled people can work from home and all the non-disabled people can work in the office. That's absolutely not what should be the case. It should be about
hopefully
choice.
Not happening. Yeah, hopefully not happening.
It should be about, because lots of non-disabled people love working from home and lots of disabled people love working in the office. So it's no kind of excuse not to make the office accessible.
Yeah.
But as you say, I think the danger is that sometimes employers think we've got to get everything perfect before we start doing anything. And we often come across employers when we're talking about using our job board, and they'll say, oh, no, we're not ready to employ disabled people yet. And my answer to that is, A, you are already. You won't know it because they won't have told you, but you are already. And B, if you're going to preempt what people need, it means that you're going to make the decision on their behalf what they might need. And you almost certainly get it wrong if that's not informed by lived experience. So actually, the best thing to do is to do it all in tandem, so that you're bringing disabled people, people with sight loss, into your organization while you're making the changes, because they can help you inform them. They can say, well, actually, when I was applying for this job, I found this part of the recruitment process really difficult. And actually talk to people who didn't get through, people who applied and didn't get through, and get feedback on, you know, what barriers they might have faced. And then it's about that gradual learning, continuous improvement. I mean, we only employ disabled people, but we still get things wrong. We still have to improve. You know, things change, new technology comes on board, new disabilities, you know, long COVID, who'd heard of that?
Yeah. It is, and the thing is that we're all humans, aren't we, in this mix together, and anxieties is a big part of everyone's life.
Yeah.
The blind and partially sighted person's anxieties are right at that first hurdle, and once we've got them through that job board and got them sat at a desk or at a workplace, as we have two very good role models at the moment that RNIB are promoting. One's a manager in an absolute superstar employer, and the other person works for a packaging company and he's on goods out, and he's able to use his eyesight very safely. So we've got to think of where the blind person through the barriers, and then work through the barriers, as I say, think minimum, and then build and build and build, and eventually these people will move around. And the part that my whole career is based on is that lifelong learning. But we want people that are applying for jobs of tomorrow and learning the skills of tomorrow. To get to tomorrow, we've got to go through today, and this is where we all are. So if we leave people at home, you're going to miss out at home unemployed. You're going to miss out on the skills that they have that we don't know. And they may have that widget idea that will help your business flourish and become a market leader.
Absolutely. And I wonder, I mean, there may well be employers who are listening to this who are thinking, you know, this is massive. I just haven't got a clue even where to start. What would you say would be, you know, if someone's thinking, I really want to get this right, but it just seems too big a mountain to climb, and technology and buildings and recruitment processes and employment practices, where on earth do I start? What would you say to an employer who's looking at it?
That's an absolute great question. And I think if we can just get them to start looking at that question itself, where do I go? How do I get through the next step? Well, I'm really fortunate to be working on a project with the RNIB, which is called Visibly Better Employer. It's a quality standard that looks at the processes from start through to the evolution of where your employees are today with sight loss. And we'll work with you, we'll support you, we'll help you look at what funding is available to help support that process. What are meant by reasonable adjustments for a blind and partially sighted person. Look at your policies and procedures in there, and we'll do it within simple steps, and we'll work with you. So that the first thing there that I would love them to do is to reach out, is the first thing. Contact myself. and have an open conversation through Teams, as you've probably gathered. If you've got to this stage of the webinar, I can talk, but I also am really passionate about helping you. Then we can then look at the assessment process, and the assessment is what it is. It looks at the process. It's an evolution. We're going to come back to you in year 1 and year 2 to see how success is happening and how you have evolved in being able to recruit and employ blind and partially sighted people, and listen to you where the successes are and share them. As I say, yesterday's meeting I had, and the person hopefully that is listening to this will know I'm talking about them, that they're thinking ahead of the game. They're ahead of the curve, knowing that they want to employ an inclusive team because they've got a strategy. And that's where I can come in and help you with that as well. And there are plenty of businesses that are out there supporting me at the moment. Obviously today we're here with Evenbreak, but that's the first point, Jane, is reach out, have a chat with us.
I think that's really reassuring, isn't it? Because I think there are organisations out there who really do want to get this right, but don't know where to go. And I think the message here really is that you're not on your own. You don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to fight through something that you really don't know much about, haven't got much experience of, frightened of getting it wrong, don't really know where to start. You know, you're not on your own. And this isn't a kind of, oh, let's test organisations to see how bad they are. This is very much about trying to help organisations learn where they are, get better, improve. It's about that continuous improvement. So it's enabling. It's not about mocking or anything like that. So I would say to any employer listening to this, if you are in that situation where you're thinking either, I don't know where to start, or, well, I think we've started, but I don't know where we can go from here, or I think we're doing things well, but there may be some things we're not doing. Wherever you are on that journey, whether it's right at the beginning or some of the way through it, you know, reach out. Visibly Better Employers, it's called. And it's there are a number of benefits, I think, and we've gone through it ourselves at Evenbreak, and I think there are a number of benefits. The first one, of course, is benchmarking what you're doing. Are you celebrating the things that you're already doing, which you're doing well, but also identifying those things that perhaps you could be doing a bit better, or maybe finding some solutions that you weren't aware of that existed. Looking through each of your processes in a very kind of structured way so that you're not floundering around, not knowing where to start. So it's certainly worth doing in terms of benchmarking where you are, getting a kind of roadmap about what you can do to improve. And that will help people who are already in your organisation with sight loss, and it will also help you attract other candidates. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this was to make sure that when we're trying to recruit, that we make sure that people with sight loss know that we are here, we're interested in their talent, we're open to their talent, and we've looked at this in a way that means we can put things right that we've got wrong, and that we're keen to learn, we're keen to put the right things in place. So for me, it's about inwardly, internally, trying to improve everything we're doing, but then actually shouting about that externally so that people know that this is an organisation where they feel safe. The only thing is, it's a ridiculously expensive process, isn't it, Roy?
Very much. Yeah. So the process, let's start there, is it's expensive on time, but not on cost.
Absolutely free of charge, isn't it? Which is
there's no charge, and every time I look at that, there's no charge for that. Coming from a commercial world, it does surprise me, because part of it is we will, for free, review your career page and write back to you with the needs that may be made to that website or page, I should say. Then the processes and policies, again, we'll work with you to make sure to check them for accessibility, that that's all for free. At the moment, we've had 30 businesses go through this. So let's put the benchmark there. This isn't a process that is going out to hundreds and thousands of businesses. We're evolving and making the right choices of the businesses that go through the process. Of those 30 businesses that have gone through, we've placed approximately 310 people that are blind and partially sighted. So think of that 11,000 that we mentioned right at the beginning. we're a long way to go to get that to increase. But in the last quarter, we've had 80 blind and partially sighted people go into employment. So there is this growing trend of where we're going. The RNIB are not just promoting this as its only safety net, the Visibly Better Employer. We also are working on the other side with the people that are looking for work, the 11,000 people, and they're aware of the quality standard kite mark, and they know if they apply for that job, that employer is aware and educated in what blind and partially sighted people need to gain meaningful employment. And you know, we're here and we want to support the employers on the journey and work with others. It is a great standard and worthwhile.
Absolutely, and it's just a way of, you know, if you are in that position where you think, I don't know where to start, it's structured, it gives you the things that you need to look at, the things you can prioritize, the things, you know, the things that you're already doing well, the things that you might need to improve on. And I just think it takes all that fear away of, am I doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? What are we doing wrong that we don't even know we're doing wrong? And I would absolutely encourage any employer who's listening to this, either live or the recorded version, to get in touch with Roy. How do they get in touch with you, Roy?
The best place is through the RNIB website or through my email address. Will my details go out, or shall I?
Yeah, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, have a read through the email addresses, but you can find me on most social media channels. As I say, I'm passionate about this being successful. So find me on LinkedIn and just ask me that question. As Jane knows, I'm probably more reactive to an email than sometimes on a phone call, because I'm in a meeting, because the process. Shall I talk about the process a little bit, really?
Yeah, so I think that would be it. Yes, I was going to say we haven't had any questions through yet, but that would be what a question I would want to ask if I was listening. Yeah, it's an evolving thing. So look at how the process from start to end would be. It's going to be, first of all, make contact. Let's have a chat. From that chat, we'll work out where you are on the scale of going through Visibly Better Employer. I have, as I say, there's 30 gone through, but I have another 30 or 40 employers I'm talking to that are on the journey of collecting their strategies on how they increase their workforce. Once that half-hour meeting's gone through, the next meeting will probably be about an hour. In that hour, we'll talk through the 6 questions of the quality standard and look at how you place your business with that. You then go away and fill the form in. And then email the form back to us. So that will probably take you another hour. And then over the next 2, maybe 3 interviews, we'll work our way through an action plan. The action plan leading you to be qualified as a visibly better employer. As I say, the zero cost on doing the application. The changes, hopefully, you're looking at anyway, because you're going to look at having that diverse workforce. And the impact, if nothing else, the quality standard will be read by the blind and visually impaired people through our website and other social media channels. It's a bit of a no-brainer, really, isn't it, as an employer? You know, if you're genuinely inclusive and want to attract a diverse workforce, then it's something that's, it might take a few hours, but actually, if it's going to mean that your processes are better, that your policies are better, that your website's better, and that people are educated, then it's well worth that time commitment, because look what you're going to gain. You're going to gain a whole pool of candidates you might not have attracted previously.
Well, just to put a slight twist on it, one of the companies I'm working with is a housing developer, and they've got 3,000 houses to sell. So they're putting themselves through, and that's on one site, they're putting themselves through the Visibly Better Employer standard, because they want to make sure that their sales team are aware that they can sell to blind and visually impaired people. So it's not just about the immediate employer, it's about the products that you're selling and the products and services that you're offering. So it has quite a multi-layered impact across a business.
For sure, yeah, because if you're selling inclusive products and services, again, you open up to all of those, not just the people with sight loss, but their families and their friends and, you know, other people who want to access things that their family member or friend does. So it's much wider than the 11,000 people. So for me, it's the right thing to do. Of course, it's the right thing to do from a kind of moral and ethical standpoint, but also from a business point of view, attracting talent that you might not be attracting, but also attracting customers that you might not have been attracting has got to be, it's got to make perfect sense. Well, we haven't had any questions. It must mean we've explained everything incredibly clearly. But obviously, everybody who's watching this, if you want to get in touch with Evenbreak or with RNIB for any further information, we'll be there to answer those questions. We can signpost you. And having done the Visibly Better Employer accreditation, I would thoroughly recommend it, because I think I learned a lot from it. I've gained a lot from it, and I think Evenbreak is a better place for it. And we're going to be attracting some of those amazing candidates as well over the years to come. So thanks very much, Roy, for joining me today. And thank you to Lynn and Lydia for your excellent BSL interpretation, and also to Heather for your captioning. And for Toby for his behind the scenes techie bit, which always goes very, very smoothly. Wouldn't do if I was in charge of it. So thanks, everyone. This will be out on the Evenbreak site when it's done up with its subtitles and things. So you'll be able to access it and watch it again if you need to, or to promote it to other people who may have missed it. But yeah, again, thanks very much, Roy, for your time today, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. Bye-bye.